matchups favoring the San Francisco 49ers. I have a feeling this list might be a little bit longer than the next list, but I do think there are some things that favor Tampa as well. But just looking at this one on paper, you can go anywhere you want with this one, Ben. What matchups do you think favor the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, so I got 3 matchups, and I think there's more, but 3 that really favor the 49ers. The first one is going to be Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel versus these 2 corners. These corners are having career worst years. Jamal Dean and Carlton Davis, career worst passer rating, completion percentage allowed. I want to say yards per reception. They're either worst or second worst in the 5 or 6 years of both their careers. So yeah, I mean, no, Carlton Davis, I don't know how else to say it. He got cooked versus the Texans, like cooked. And I think Ayuk is going to have himself a day in specific. I'm kind of curious to see how Deebo gets used against this team. I think he'll probably be more of sort of an illusion sort of guy. They'll use him to get other players out in space like McCaffrey and Kittle and Ayuk. But no, I think if Brandon Ayuk doesn't have a good game, it's because Brock Purdy is having issues, not because Brandon Ayuk is having issues. So I think that's the first matchup that kind of sticks out to me. Is that one you had written down, Jesse?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, against second. Now, I will say this: Antoine Winfield, safety, one of the better safeties in the league this year. He's having a hell of a year, all pro year.
Yeah,
very, very good safety. The corners have been a little bit iffy. Like I said, I do like McCollum, but yeah, definitely a matchup that I think certainly favors the San Francisco 49ers for sure. I'll give you another one that I think favors the San Francisco 49ers. I think I think the 49ers, and I know that it's been talked about a ton here, okay? But the 49ers run defense is not as bad as people want to make it out to be. And Tampa Bay, as you said, is absolutely awful in the run game. You called it terrible, in fact.
Yeah.
The 49ers defense is going to win that matchup hands down against the Buccaneers run.
Absolutely. And this kind of goes to the coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Dave Canales, who spent 12 years in Seattle, was a quarterbacks coach, was the I want to say pass game coordinator for a few years. He was, people credit him mostly with the Geno resurgence or being a part of that at least. But he kind of does this Seattle thing where the Buccaneers are terrible up the middle, running the ball between the tackles, and they're going to do it about 10 to 15 times this game. For what reason, I don't know. But the Buccaneers are 32nd in rush EPA per play. Over the last few weeks, even when their offense has been better, it's kind of the best stretch they've been in. They're still like 24th in rush EPA per play. Even over the last 4 or 5 weeks, it's 29th. Like they're the worst running offense in the league right now. It's not even close. And Rachaad White isn't necessarily the problem. The problem is that their interior of their offensive line is kind of just a mess. They had Ryan Jensen, who had a terrible knee injury, right? Yeah. He came back for the playoff game last year, but missed in the entirety of the regular season. We saw him during training camp here and there, but we always kind of didn't really know what was going on with him, right? And it seemed like a thing where maybe they're resting him one day, playing him the next, and they were doing a little bit of that. But then in the Buccaneers' final preseason game against the Ravens, it comes out at halftime, or actually, sorry, no, wasn't at halftime, but the Buccaneers GM went on the broadcast, the TV broadcast, a local one here, and said, Ryan Jensen isn't going to play this year. We're putting him on season-ending IR. I was with the beat reporters that day who covered this team for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're, I can hear them saying profanity in the media box, like really like what the, they had no idea what was going on with the Ryan Jensen situation. Of course his
career might be done, sadly, right? Like that's not normal,
No, it's not. I've seen him around the facility here and there. Buccaneers, each locker room has their own little game. The Buccaneers have chess, so you see him playing chess every now and then. But even then, I want to say I haven't seen him in the last month and a half at the facility. It's just kind of really sad situation.
Reminds me of kind of the Weston Richburg situation with the San Francisco 49ers a couple years ago. So.
Yeah, but I would say even more extreme than that. Ryan Jensen.
Oh, Jensen's a way better player. Way, way,
Oh,
way
I
better
mean,
player. Yeah.
even in terms of injury and
Oh,
impact and all that too, because Ryan Jensen, I mean, of course, we know what happened with Weston Richburg, but Ryan Jensen, I mean, he came to the podium after that preseason game when it was announced he was going to be done, and he was in tears, man.
yeah.
He was shaken up. I've never seen a player that visibly shaken up. So that was a real bummer. And then, their two guard spots are just not really good. They have Aaron Stinney, who's been starting at left guard in place of Matt Filer, who's missed the last few games. But honestly, Aaron Stinney, who's like a 6th-round pick, has been better than Matt Filer has been. So that kind of tells you what you need to know. And then
Yeah.
Cody Mock is a notable player. He's at right guard. He was a 2nd-round pick, and I'm sure you might know that name, Jesse, because he played at North Dakota State.
Yep.
He was the left tackle there, converted from tight end. So he's a project player, and he has those moments that you kind of expect to see out of those players. So that kind of led into my next point. The Buccaneers' interior offensive line is a mess. I think they're bottom 3 to 5 in the league. And I kind of hesitate from saying the worst just because I don't really know the rest of the league interior offensive linemen that well. But no, the tackles are good on this team, but the 49ers are going to be able to win on the interior. They're going to be able to mess up this run game that the Bucs have that is awful already. So yeah, I think there's some things if you're a Tampa Bay Bucs fan where you're like, hey, Cody Mock sort of looks good. And then you're like, okay, I guess, I don't know. He's still a developing player. He needs to put on more weight. Really, really a project. So yeah, this interior offensive line is awful.
Yeah, it definitely is. And yes, Wirfs is playing. He's left tackle now, not right tackle. Yeah. He made that move.
Well, and
made that transition this year.
He's had some injuries, so I think that's why that question came up. But he hasn't missed any time so far. He just had one moment where it looked like he was going to exit the game, but he's a tough dude.
I feel like he's always a little bit banged up. Every time it seemed like all last year he was on the injury report, but he always found a way to play. So.
Yeah, no, he does always find a way to play.
Brother Bob says this is probably not going to make sense to Ben at all, but he calls Larry Kruger, who's a content creator in the space as well, Purdy's pimp. So he says you're better than Purdy's pimp. We need to trade for you. You're objective. All right, fair enough. Is there any other matchups before we move on that you think favor the 49ers that we didn't talk about, or we want to get to the other side of things?
I don't know. I don't want to say it's going to favor the 49ers, but I think of course, we talked about the Bucs having a great running defense. That's going to be really fascinating for me, because McCaffrey has not had the same rushing totals that he's had over this last month compared to his last, 20 or so games with the Niners. So that to me is going to be the most fascinating matchup from 49ers versus Bucs is, Bucs run defense has been excellent. They got Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, who have been really good. And Todd Bowles just does a lot of good things in terms of mixing up fronts. I think people, in terms of defensive coordinators you talk about around the league, see a lot of guys doing different things with coverage right now, right? But Todd Bowles will give you a lot of different looks in terms of this front. So I think that's going to be a really fascinating matchup to see how Purdy deals with that, how Kyle deals with that, how they change, over the course of the game with dealing with that front. Because I don't think it's the most talented front, but they have good enough players and will do enough different things to where they can disrupt teams.
Yeah, most certainly. And then the linebackers, when they're playing at their best, I mean, that's a hell of a tandem still. I think there were times last year that I watched them like, man, these guys are just not even playing hard. I don't know what's going on. This year, it seems like they're kind of back to their old ways. They both seem very, very good this year. So who knows what's going on with them? But, the Bucs do have two very good linebackers when they're playing at their best. So.
Yeah. No. Lalonte David does a really good job against tight ends. He's more the coverage guy. And I compared him to Kittle earlier because he's kind of at that same point in their career. And then Devin White, he's in a contract year, so he's going to be playing.
He's going to ball out because last year he took his foot off the gas a lot. I was not a lot of effort coming from him on film from what I saw, but this year he seems to have it all together. And you're right. I know there was talks about him getting possibly traded as well this offseason. Obviously, that didn't happen. I'm sure a lot of teams were very interested. I think Seattle was one of the teams that was interested. So
Oh, definitely.
thank goodness that didn't happen.